I just noticed that I was having like abdomen pains and it was really hard to use the restroom. And I've never had that in my whole life. So originally I thought, as I'm getting older, I was like, well, maybe I have a reaction to cheese. So I kind of just, I'll eliminate cheese. But then it happened 2 weeks later. And I thought to myself, okay, well, that's weird. So it can't be cheese. And so I went into the doctor. This is about April, end of April. And immediately the doctor just said, you're IBS-C. But then again, in like 2 weeks later, I was having these abdomen pains. I mean, the pains were unreal. I couldn't use the bathroom. It would take me down for at least 2 days. And up until this point, I have never missed a day at work. I went back in and I was like, I don't know, something's not right. And again, he was like, you're IBS-C, eliminate this from your diet. It kept happening almost like clockwork every 3 weeks. I wasn't able to go to the bathroom. Everything was coming. I was throwing everything up. And I just knew, although I didn't want to admit this to myself, that I was throwing up poop. And I went into the doctor in June and I told him, I was like, I know what I just was throwing up this past weekend. And he just said, I don't think you were. And then by the time I went into September, they were still telling me I'm IBS-C. And I had now at this point had eliminated everything from my diet except sparkling water. Like that was all that was left. And I even said that to the doctor. I was like, there's nothing more I can change. I had to fight and claw and cry my way into a colonoscopy. And I went in for that September 14th. They perforated my colon when they ran into a lemon-sized tumor. I came out of that colonoscopy screaming because with the colonoscopy, they put all the gas and air in you. So I was like screaming in pain. And because they perforated my colon, I was getting prepped for emergency surgery. I went into emergency surgery a couple hours later where they removed about 70% of my colon and my appendix, which I learned is sort of normal. And at that point, they just stapled me up. And it was 2 days later that I was in the hospital that the doctor came in to let me know that it was cancer. I think because all of this was such a shocking blur, I don't think I was even able to process it right away. About 9 days after the surgery, I started getting really sick at home and I just had a fever. I ended up passing out. My parents called an ambulance and then again, I was throwing up everything in my stomach. And that's when they realized that a stitch had come loose and my entire abdomen, stomach was filled with, everything that you don't want there. So then I was rushed back to the hospital in the ambulance and went immediately into surgery. And this was the biggest surgery because I was going septic. And it was at that point that they were trying to clear out all the infection, but I was so infected that they couldn't close my stomach. So they put this thing called a wound vac on it from bra line to panty line. And I had to have an ileostomy at that point. So much bigger surgery. About 12 days after that, I coughed and I looked at my mom and I was like, we need to go to the hospital. And I was like having that taste again. And I'm like, something's not right. I didn't just get a pneumonia. I got E. coli pneumonia. So then I was in the hospital and that actually was the closest that I was to death, even after septic. I was in the ICU for, I think, 12 days and had to be on level 10 oxygen because my blood oxygen was like 81. So that was the longest and probably the scariest part because the nurse kept saying, like, if you leave here, you're going to die. They couldn't do treatment with a wound vac on because they literally sent me home with it was about this big of a hole in my stomach. So you could literally see all the way in. So I had to have that healed. And that took about 4.5 months for it to finally close. I had 12 rounds of chemo. So it was just about 6 months. Two things helped me. Like I talked to my doctor to see if I could take a Xanax when I was starting to feel like I've got two very big sides fighting with each other. And that did help. And then the other thing that really, really helped me is because you do get dehydrated. Personally, I'm horrible at drinking water. And they don't offer this unless you ask. But when they disconnect you from the chemo, ask for an IV of fluids. That, when I started doing that, I think I did that around halfway through. That really helped that recovery for that week. And then, because it's every other week, so that makes that week a little bit more bearable. There is one of the drugs that mostly anyone with colon cancer will have is called oxyplatin. And that comes with really insane side effects for neuropathy. About a quarter in, I started to feel the cold sensations. It's kind of hard to drink like an ice cold drink, and like my nose felt like it was frostbite, but it was manageable. When I finished chemo, what was weird for me was it was about a month afterwards. So I finished in June, and in about mid-July, I was running into a neurologist because the pain, especially in my feet, like now I was really feeling all of this neuropathy. Because of the chemo, I now have permanent chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy. So every step I take feels like I'm stepping on like fire rods, and the pain just goes up my legs. My fingertips aren't as bad as my feet. It just sort of feels like you put your hand on a stove like this, and like a hot stove, and you just kind of burn the tips of your fingers. Now I live in constant pain. It's changed everything. I think that mentally, I didn't even know I was struggling so much mentally because there's nobody to talk to. It is so polarizing because people just don't understand. Unless you have physically had cancer, people don't understand. And I call it the aftermath. You go in one way, you come out another. And then everybody, like you try to explain it to people, and everybody, they mean well. They'll say, well, at least you made it through. Well, of course. Duh. But I've made it through, and now I can't find myself. I take 10 pills a day just for the neuropathy, and all that does is bring the pain down slightly. So yeah, I think we can do much better for our survivors. Last year personally was finally the best year I've had since cancer. It was also my best year professionally, so there's definitely a link there. And I just feel more like Kristen, like I don't talk about cancer anymore. So that gives me hope that I feel like I can do daily things without having to lean back on the cancer crutch. So that gives me hope. Before my diagnosis, I traveled. I led Habitat for Humanity builds in other countries. I lead trips for people to go and explore the world. I hiked, I kayaked, anything that had to do with water. I love water. And just really spent my time outside of work traveling to learn about other cultures. I would love to get back to leading trips. And I'm just starting that. I'm going to lead a trip through South Africa next year. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.